This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
Good evening and welcome to the Brighton Central School District Board of Education business meeting and budget adoption for April 9th, 2019. To begin this evening, we welcome members of the public that are here in attendance who may wish to address the board. You're welcome to address the board on any matter. It does not have to be something that is an agenda item. And you may make a statement, you may ask a question. We ask you to be brief. And when recognized, I'm going to ask if you would step to the podium, please, and give us your name and address. So is there anyone here this evening who wishes to address the Board of Education? Okay, seeing that we have no one right at the moment who wishes to avail themselves of public participation, I will entertain, please, a motion for approval of our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Marv and seconded by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And first up, please, a motion for approval of the minutes from our March 26, 2019 budget proposal, budget hearing meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry, seconded by Julene. Does anyone have any corrections or additions, deletions to those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Then as I mentioned in the open tonight is our scheduled budget adoption. So to begin that process this evening, I turn it over to Dr. McGowan to provide us updated executive budget proposal information.
Thank you very much. So I know this will come as an incredible disappointment, particularly to the members of the audience tonight, that this is not the full 48-slide presentation of the executive budget proposal. I know I hear the groans of upsetness behind me, but this is the condensed version and the update based on information that is new since the last time that it was presented. So the Tuesday before the final budget was adopted by the state of New York, we presented the proposal to you, and this is an update based on their work or their lack of work. And what I mean by lack of work is the incredible disappointment that we have in the lack of state aid that's being provided to Brighton, which I'll talk about in the presentation tonight. We had hoped, in fact, we presented to you on the 26th, a place marker of $500,000 was an appropriate amount of aid to count on coming from the state based on the Assembly and the Senate proposals, and they were woefully, I'm not sure if incompetent is the right word, but unable to fulfill even that promise, which is far below the aid that the district should be getting, which does have an impact on our budget, and I'll highlight how we've had to make changes since that point in time. The budget factors, as you know, that we review in this process each and every year, we look at increased staffing demands due to enrollment, emerging needs, changing standards, our labor increases, including the increase in minimum wage, which has an impact throughout our bargaining units, increase in health insurance rates due to, although the premiums staying flat, the number of people participating, our contribution rates beginning to increase in our health insurance plans, our elective demands for students, the impact of our capital project over time and planning for full-day kindergarten. This really plays a big part in the conversation tonight around fulfilling the promise that in 2017 our taxpayers approved by a very wide margin a capital project to focus on facility improvements across the district, but to be able to add full-day kindergarten. And we have to now fulfill that promise in the budget process. So we'll explain that as well. The tax levy growth or the property tax cap around 2%, changes in our mandated programs for students, as I mentioned, elective demands, and changes in state and federal aids, the state deficit or potential for a deficit, our proposed, the governor's proposed cap on reimbursable aids, which had us looking differently in our budget as well, and changes in federal funding proposed by the Trump administration, a loss of potential title grant monies. And again, as I mentioned, the foundation aid issue in our district playing the biggest role in this conversation, and the impact of federal tax reform, particularly the elimination of the ability for deduction for state and local taxes, a reduction in that benefit, and how that impacts our taxpayers here in the district who might now or in the next 6 days file their 5 days file their income taxes, and discovering what that means in their process. Really important for us to point out, I think, over and over again, that budgets, in our opinion, communicate our priorities. Where we devote resources, where you as a community devote resources, really says quite a bit about how you feel we should be supporting kids and what you feel is best in terms of our support of kids. Bottom left-hand corner, frankly, it's a value statement. So we could talk about values all we want, but where we put our money is the statement about those values that is, I think, most realistic and says the most. The executive budget proposal meets and exceeds state standards to support every one of our children across the spectrum, everything that they need. It provides funding in support of the blueprint plans that we have, particularly focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and safety security. And it certainly respects taxpayers and honors commitments. Well, what do we mean by that, particularly when we're proposing going over the cap? It respects the fact that in 2017, taxpayers did approve a capital project referendum to add to our debt service, but to revitalize our facilities. We need to be respectful of that promise. We also owe it to our taxpayers to provide some level of predictability. And if we don't begin to pay on that project now, the program grows significantly in the next budget year. And if we don't plan for full-day kindergarten now and continue to add positions, we will see a spike in property taxes over time, which we don't want to see. So this is respectful of that towards taxpayers. Points of pride included in our budget, really important to point out on the left-hand side, the pieces that we think are so important. They're essential to the puzzle pieces or the pie in this district. Instructional leadership and professional development. Very important to what we're doing and our level of support each and every day in classrooms, the types of things that are helping teachers continue to do great work with kids. Our co-curricular athletic and art opportunities for students as well are awfully important. Thank you very much. Making sure that our kids, so many of whom connect to school in very different ways through the wide variety of clubs that we have and the many athletic opportunities that they have, that is also supported in this budget. Our additional intervention services for students beyond the mandates, it's what has closed the gap for so many of our kids from all different parts of our school, so all different groups in our school achieving at a very high level because we're giving kids what they need that goes beyond just the state's basic requirement. Our summer school offerings that also support student needs, so students don't fall behind and can stay on the right pace for graduation. We know when kids fall behind and can't get credits, they're less likely to graduate if they don't continue along the right path in high school, and we want to make sure they do that. Small class sizes and additional course offerings are a big part of this budget as well. We continue to be able to support those with some changes. Some of the efficiencies we were able to find, but we still believe we have small class sizes and plenty of electives for students. And the team teaching structure at the middle school is so important to supporting the adolescent child at that level, providing the right amount of time for teachers to meet, talk about students, for students to operate on a team with consistency among their teachers. That structure is able to stay in place with this budget as well. And transportation services for all students in our school community. In other words, we are required to provide transportation for all students, including those in private parochial schools. We're able to continue to support those students, the non-public students, on days when we don't have school. This is the one service that so many of our families take advantage of from the district who may send their children to other schools. This is the place where their tax dollars are going to work for them, and it is very important to their children receiving the education that they're expecting from their private provider as well. It is a relatively small cost item, in fact only costing about $50,000, the difference between the everyday transportation when our kids are in session and when those schools are not in session, but it's something we like to point out that we're able to maintain because we care about every child, even those that are not attending our public school each and every day. And on the right-hand side, new in this budget for 2019-20, we'll have a dedicated full-time equivalency, not necessarily a full-time person, but more funding dedicated as opposed to consultant fees for a diversity consultant in the district for diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's been enormously successful this year with Marla Washington working with us, and we're able to budget for that next year and expand that service for somebody who's been a great advocate for all of our families, a great go-between, somebody who's taught us, worked with our faculty, and worked with many families. The Family Navigator Service, which is helping families navigate the mental health system and bringing services right here on campus from private providers, helping people get in the door. We recognize that a big obstacle to people gaining service, working with mental health providers, is actually getting there and getting an appointment. We have a staff member here that's helping families achieve that, which is helping them be more successful in school and have a better experience. Additional full-time equivalencies to expand our services for English as New Language, ENL students. We have, this is a mandated service that we've accounted for as well. We have more students coming each year. In fact, a large group at particular grade levels moving through our system of students who don't speak English as a first language. I think our teachers provide an excellent service in that way, but we're expanding the number of teachers who will be doing that based on mandate. Enhanced school safety staffing as well, additional security staff to continue to think about how best to keep our students safe, K through 12, and continue planning for the full-day kindergarten program, which will happen in 2021. We need to continue to plan personnel, staffing, funding in that portion of the budget so that when we get to that point, we're not in 1 year asking taxpayers to fund the entire expansion of the program. We need to build towards that. That's the respecting taxpayers and making sure we keep those tax increases level over time. And it fully funds, and this is a big important piece of this, in 2017, our taxpayers approved a capital project to revitalize our facilities and be able to add space at Council Rock for a full-day kindergarten, but to expand and revitalize facilities K through 12. That was approved in 2017. This is when that car payment now comes due. If we wait to begin paying on that debt, we can only wait another year, it compounds our issue. And the simple explanation of this that I'll give several times is we don't have a car payment in our budget. We paid off our car a long time ago. We didn't buy a new car, or when we did, we paid cash for it. So we didn't factor in debt service into our monthly budget like you would do at home for your car payment. And when that car payment ends, some people put that money towards a new car, or they spend it on something else. Well, we spent it on something else. It was called program and lowering people's taxes over time. So now we're able to say, we have to go back out. Now we did this project, or we're doing this project. We need to have this debt service in our budget. And this is the year that it goes in. It won't have to go in again. It will now be there. And so that's also funded in this year's proposal as well. The overall spending, we're asking the community to increase spending by 4.5%, but it's really important to point out that's 2.9% in operations. So the regular budget that we would propose to the community and come to you to propose would be an operations budget. In other words, doing everything that we're doing now and looking at programming that we need for next year would be a 2.9% increase in spending. It gets up to 4.5 because of that capital expenditure, the debt service, the car payment that I just mentioned. So that's the increase in capital that accounts for 1.6% of a 4.5% spending increase overall. You can see where our salary line will go up, our total salary spending. So not each person, but total overall based on people leaving, people coming, and retirements, etc. will go up 3.1% total spending in that area. The benefits line actually will be down $185,000. That's because of flat rates in the health insurance plans. The BOCES cost will go up $152,000. That's for an increased cost that's provided to us. We are billed for that. Supplies and services, the overall cost of doing business, again, in an $80 million budget is up $1.2 million, a relatively normal increase. But debt service will go up $1.2 million. That would be a heck of a car if I keep using the household analogy, but that's to build buildings. So remember, I want to go through this again. We didn't build buildings here for a long time. I was explaining earlier to the board the idea of upcycling, not that they need me to explain it to them, but mentioned that a student today told me about how she was designing clothing. This was a student in 7th grade who's a designer. Upcycling, so using previously used materials to upcycle them, make them into something better. Well, we were doing that with our buildings for a long, long time. We were upcycling. Well, now we're at a point where we had to build on, we needed more space, and we had to take care of costly repairs and revitalization throughout the district. We couldn't keep just upcycling. We had to really improve them in ways that required us to take on debt that we did not have. Remember, when we didn't have debt, we used that towards program, and during a period of time when the state was taking money in the gap elimination adjustment, we were able to fund our other expenditures through that same funding, whereas other districts kept their debt service. We didn't do that. Now we're going back to the community saying, okay, we need that back now. We need to put that back in the budget. That accounts for the $1.2 million. Give you a little bit more detail around the spending that we're proposing. All the way down on the right-hand side is that same issue. This is the dollar amount, but spelled out differently in this type of chart. It's a 68% increase, or $1.2 million, because we don't have very much debt service. So we're putting the car payment in. Right above that, transportation services are increasing 11%, but that's because we're taking that service back from BOCES, who could no longer provide it, which is why you see the increase in BOCES spending only 2.1% right here. We had to take back $356,000, or a portion of that, just for particular transportation for students with special needs that BOCES could no longer provide. So we took on the service, but again, there's a drop where we would have had a bigger increase in another place in the budget, and that instructional materials and supplies up 18%, or about $800,000. We see only an increase overall in salary and benefits. When you take that benefit line, that's down just a little bit because we're in a healthcare consortium, does the best job it possibly can at being efficient. A drop of 0.8% along with the salary change. Our total spending in that area is only going up 1.6% in next year's budget. So the biggest change, again, is that capital increase, that car payment down here at the bottom. But take a look at these mandated services. Really important to point this out. The $572,000, most of that experienced just in the last couple of months, and an increase in tuitions and mandated programs for students who require a particular type of service that's very, very expensive. We don't begrudge that for a moment. We don't regret that. That's what we should be doing. But it's important to note that that's a cost pressure. When that goes up $572,000 and our state aid's not going up nearly that amount, that's $572,000 in an $80 million a year budget where everything else is going up. And I mentioned, for example, just $1.2 million in material supplies, and our state aid number is not going up nearly the same percent to account for that, which is why we have to ask the community to help support all of these changes. That contract transportation I mentioned, that's the transportation taken back from BOCES, and $100,000 in health services paid to other districts. And these are the mandated costs when we have students attending private parochial schools in other school districts. Those schools are located. The nursing service that's provided to them is billed back to our district, and the cost of that is going up $109,000 in next year's budget. That debt service funding, again, that car payment issue, what if we were to delay that? What would the problem look like? If you take a look here at the building aid, we're getting very little building aid because you don't get that until the year after you spend it. We'll have a lot more building aid coming on next year to help account for that. The debt service is in the blue column on the left-hand side. Just imagine if we were to take this blue column from 1920, add it on to 2021, because that will not go away. We will have to pay that. And that will still be a significant expense then that would need to be accounted for in next year's budget. The net levy increase, though, significant coming into this year, but then as you can see, it will level off then over time once the debt service payment is in. Where does our revenue come from? We're very respectful of the notion that most of our funding comes from the taxpayers here in the Brighton Central School District, 67% of that. Our state aid is only 10% and foundation aid. Reimbursable aid is 11%. Again, this is not the benevolence of the state. This is their responsibility. This is their job. A large part of state funding, your state tax dollars, are supposed to be coming back to you in the form of a free appropriate public education for your children. This should be much bigger. Your property taxes should be lower, and the state should be doing more to fulfill their obligation. We'd like to see that increase over time. The 1920 budget, the executive budget proposal, assumed that we would get at least 52.5%. Only 52.5% of our aid. Didn't think that that was too big of an expectation at all, considering where the Assembly and the Senate were in the process. But after having to negotiate fully with the governor, we ended up with only 50%, 50.3% of the aid that was due to us, which is why we're coming back to the community then and saying that we need to be over the cap. And we've made accommodations within the budget, but because we're not getting the full amount, even that we had expected, but the full amount or a bigger percentage, without massive cuts to programming or really delaying the strategy of beginning our debt service now and compounding our problem, we have to ask for it to go over the cap. It'd be a significant challenge. If you take a look at the foundation aid issue and just a little bit of the history, the orange and the blue all together are the total amount that we should be getting in this school district. And that comes from a formula that's developed, negotiated in Albany years ago that values certain items in your demographics. So the amount of kids you have, the number of kids you have total, but also who receive free and reduced lunch, then as a measure of need in the district, the number of students that speak English as a new language, the number of students with special needs, a variety of factors. And they're weighted in all different ways to distribute a large sum of money across the entire state. So if you have more kids, and if you have more kids with different needs within that formula, you should get more money. Your cost of doing business is more. So when this was agreed upon, you can see we were supposed to be getting about $12 million, and the full phase-in amount up to this point right now, we'd be up over $16 million that should be coming to the district. Unfortunately, the state's not fulfilled that obligation. And as our numbers have grown and our need has grown over time, the percent increase has not come close to meeting that need. We are only scheduled to receive about $8 million of the $16 million. So we should have been increasing $1.47 million this year. We're only getting $249,000. I can't make it up. Those are the numbers. We should have been going up 1.47. We're only going up $249,000. And there's no exclusion in the tax cap for increased needs in your district. So the state can decide to not honor their formula, but they have not created any mechanism within the tax cap for those variances, for those changes in your student population or your need within your district. We did, thanks to the work of Fight for Brighton and many people in this community, many people in this room, and you as a school board, and your advocacy, achieve a bump of $1 million into the 17-18 year. The problem is, literally in the documents, the ability for us to have that happen in the formula, the way that was written in was deleted in this year's work in the state budget. So that fix, although that $1 million remains in the amount, and we grow a percentage over that amount, the language that would have helped that base grow was eliminated in the agreed upon budget. So people have asked, what about that fix? Well, the fix still exists for that $1 million, but it hasn't kept pace with where that number has continued to grow and where the increases should have been. Well, how does that compare to other people, you might ask? When you look across, or you might not ask, but I'm going to still tell you anyway. Across the whole state, we take a look at what districts look like us. And these are districts from all over the state, different types of districts, but have the most similarity to us. If you take a look at this column right here, the combined wealth ratio. Combined wealth ratio, if you're, as a district, if you come out as a number 1, you're considered an average need district. So that's a combination of property wealth in your community and income tax wealth, the combined wealth ratio. And that's the way the state measures your ability as a school district to pay for your schools. So we are just below 1, just below average. And school districts that look like us around the state, Bethlehem, for example, in the Albany area, Orchard Park in the Buffalo area, they were scheduled in their full phase-in of foundation aid to get a little bit more than us. They're a little bit larger, both of those districts. So Bethlehem, 17 million, Orchard Park, just over 17 million as well. And their aid in this coming school year will be 15.9 million in Orchard Park, 12.8 million in Bethlehem. But yet Brighton, scheduled to get 16.2, is only going to get $8.2 million. By percentage, those districts, 93%, 75%, and we're just going to get 50%. How about Sayville? It's going to get 133%. Their number has dropped, likely because they have dropped in the number of students, their needs in their district have changed, yet scheduled to get 14, they're going to get $18 million. None of this makes any sense. If you look locally, where do we stack up? Way at the bottom of the list. In fact, we're 16th lowest of the 700 districts in the entire state. Compared to our neighbors, I think it's interesting if you look here at Penfield, the one with the closest combined wealth ratio to us, 0.922, we're at 0.953, both just under the 1. They're scheduled to get $19.4 million, a little bit bigger than us, so that number, that bigger number makes sense compared to our 16. But they're going to get 13.6, 70% of their aid. And we're only going to get $8.2 million, or 50.4% of our aid. So this is the fundamental issue that we have. And if you look across the Monroe 1 districts, you see this over and over again. East Rochester will get 94%, all the way down to our 50%, and everybody in between. And again, the people with the closest combined wealth ratio to us, even Pittsburgh is going to get 63%. For us, if we were getting 63%, we'd have a near 0% tax increase, to be very honest with you. We'd be getting that much more in aid. It would be such a significant jump for us. So that's what we've advocated for, and Fight for Brighton's been very helpful in that. We don't have a fix yet, and the agreed upon state budget really did very little to address this. So what we're proposing in terms of revenue then is that our community adopt a 4.89% tax increase to support this spending plan. What does that mean for the average taxpayer? Our home value that we use as the average home value is $220,000. That would be a $266 increase in next year's taxes to support that. That's a 4.89% increase. How does that compare then, and what does that mean relative to the levy for capital versus operations? The tax cap number alone, if we just went out at our tax cap number, which is 2.3%, it would cost people $127 total in their tax increase next year. If you take it the levy for capital, so that debt service payment, that alone would be our tax cap number. If all we did was pay the debt service next year, that is the tax cap number right there. The other $138 that we're asking for, this is the levy then for operations. This is everything else we need to make sure that we're supporting new programming for kids, but also to support the current existing programming, the non-mandated pieces that make the Brighton experience what it is. And that honors over here on the right-hand side, the screenshot right from the materials that we distributed to our community, asking for $144 a year. Well, that bill is now coming due for the capital project. This is based on a home value of $200,000. We've now shifted, and this is based on the $220,000 home. So we're pretty close to that number that we had promised, in fact, just a little bit less. If you take a look at what does this all mean, though, so this tax increase, the total pyramid here is the 4.89%. What is it going towards? To just re-illustrate this point, the cap number right there of 2.3% would stop us at just support for ongoing operations and programming, period. That number alone. What we need to do, though, is add in, of course, the debt service related to the improvement plan and new programming of just 0.29% in safety, security, wellness, and this is additional mental health support, additional security staff, and diversity equity support for programming, including restorative practices, and the diversity equity consultant to work in the school district. That's the additional 2.89% that we are proposing, the additional increase that we need to be able to do that. We've got to take care of that debt service, get it in right now, and we've got to be able to continue to grow our program and at the same time support ongoing operations and academic programs. Remember, if all we had was just the cap number, we could just do the debt service and cut out support for ongoing operations and academic programs, which would mean dramatically cutting programs to do that. Or vice versa, just support ongoing operations and programs and have to cut out the debt service and new programming up here. So if we just had the cap number. What if the budget, what if this proposed budget isn't approved by 60% of voters? Because remember, the property tax cap doesn't say that you can't choose as a community to exceed that 2.3% number. It simply says that if you choose to do that, 60% of people have to choose to do that. And that for doing that, you will not be eligible for the relief check, the property tax relief check that you've been receiving. So those are really the two factors. But as a community, you can choose to do that. So spending would have to be reduced by $1.3 million in order to become cap compliant. And we would have to look at non-contingent equipment, classroom furniture. We'd have to defer the debt service, the capital project piece that I just mentioned to you, that car payment I keep saying over and over again. We'd have to defer funding for the full-day kindergarten program. We'd have to look at department reductions and staff and non-mandated program reductions as well. But that's just delaying the problem. Those items will still need to be funded in next year's budget, and we would have to look at extended studies, foreign language at grade 6, instrumental music in grade 4, the additional athletic, extracurricular, arts, co-curricular activities, and the additional supports and opportunities that we have for students. That would be the result for sure. The tax cap over time has had an interesting impact in the district. When it first came about, we went out to the community and said, we don't need to be at the cap number. Just like you can choose as a district to go over it if you choose to do that, you can also choose to be under that cap number. We did. We only said to the community, we only need this amount. We don't need to go all the way to the cap. So in 12-13, we were $584,000 under the cap amount. The following year, $439,000 under the cap amount. But in 14-15, we went back out to the community and said, listen, we're straightforward with you then. We will always be straightforward with you about what we need. In the last 2 years, we haven't needed to be at the cap number. In fact, the cumulative increase over those times, if we had stayed at the cap number, would have been more than what we were asking to go out over the cap. And said that to the community at that point, and the community approved going out over the cap, feeling comfortable in that conversation. We believe that we were asking for what we needed. We have been able to, since that time, in 15-16, 16-17, 17-18, 18-19, been able to stay under the cap, which is where we always want to be. We're coming back now to the community to have that same conversation and say, now we need to again be over the cap because that's the need. That's what we need in order to support excellence and maintain our programs and to protect the long-term financial health of the district when we think about, again, that car payment, the debt service issue, and the planning for a full-day kindergarten. That issue around the property tax relief check. This was an issue several years ago. Everybody likes a check. No question about it. Especially when it's being written to you. So in the legislature and the governor in particular, decided to provide this credit instead of perhaps reducing income taxes or actually fulfilling the foundation aid formula, which is what they should be doing and have not been able to do. They decided to give people a check after the fact based on what your district did in the budget process. And it was some measure of property tax relief. For many people, the check was relatively small. It's all across the spectrum. It's based on your income and your star relief. The maximum star relief that people are getting is $794, the current max in the basic star program. Your relief check that you received is based on your income. So if your income is $75,000 or less, you get 85% of the $794. This doesn't affect the $794. You're still getting that credit, your STAR credit. This is simply the check after the fact. If your income is between $75,000 and $150,000, you're getting 60% of that max amount. Between $150,000 and $200,000, you're getting 35%, and between $200,000 and $275,000, 10.5% of the $794. So the check varies for every taxpayer. We've been completely unsuccessful in finding out from the Office of Real Property Tax. It doesn't seem to keep a record of this. How much does that mean for people in Brighton? What was the average check? What did people usually get? That's a record that they cannot produce for us. So we're asking our community members to think about the rebate check that they got, realize that your amount will be similar to that amount, and understand that that's not something that this community would be eligible for going into next year. You will still get STAR. This is just the additional check that came after the fact that was a different amount. Your STAR savings will still exist. That's not in question. We recognize there are advantages and disadvantages to going over the cap. The advantages are we preserve program, we can avoid cuts in those programs, we can fully fund that local share, that car payment, start paying that now. It does speed the growth of the levy, so the percentage increase in next year's budget, this eases some of the pressure on that because the levy starts out a little bit larger, and it speeds the funding for full-day kindergarten as well. So in other words, we would be able to still be on track for full-day kindergarten and having those positions with level tax increases. The disadvantage is it's applied earlier in the project, so it's one more year you're paying on that. It's as if you're able to make an extra payment on your mortgage. There's a great advantage on the other end, but you're starting it now. Overall taxes increase when you increase the levy base. We understand that. So incrementally next year when it goes up over a slightly larger number. And losing that rebate check as well is a concern for us that we don't take lightly at all. And I know you as board members don't on behalf of community members. So what did we do to make reductions along the way? We had to find efficiencies as well, particularly because the state did not come through with aid, and we had to do everything we could to get as close as we possibly could to the cap number, trying to also maintain program. So we adjusted our mandated services. Of course, I mentioned to you the over $500,000, actually nearly $600,000 in increased costs. We had to add that back in since we gave you the preliminary budget in January. We reduced the budget to actual projections, the risk provision. So all these bars in green are the areas where we were able to reduce from the preliminary budget that we gave you in January. These are the areas where we analyzed what our spending was, our budget to actual, and we were able to not budget as much in some lines. That's the budget to actual. Our change in revenue assumption, so places where we are able to use revenue differently. Instead of replenishing some reserves, put this towards expenses in next year's budget. Our department reductions for particular equipment, adjusted our capital allocation, so using the amount out of a capital reserve to go towards capital as well. Our class size adjustments, course offerings, we are impacting class sizes slightly, and electives. Our breakage from retirements, we've been able to count on more in that area as well. We've removed some of the new positions that we presented to you in the preliminary budget that would have been used to accommodate enrollment changes. And our occupational education services, the amount of out-of-district placements we're able to provide, particularly in BOCES programming, we've reduced the number of those from the preliminary budget as well. So our changes in staffing, in our proposed increase of $1.1 million in some staffing, we're looking at new positions for enrollment. For one, it's 6th grade. Our state mandates, we mentioned to you the English as a new language mandate. That's a mandated service, but we have to have positions for that. The proposal for diversity equity staff member to now be funded in the budget outside of the consultant model that we have this year, so this will be a set amount devoted to that position. The family navigator position that I mentioned to you before, bridging that gap for families and mental health. 3 security guard positions for use throughout the district. The full-day kindergarten spending of $113,000 so that we avoid a future tax increase spike to pay for that position. And we're bringing $50,000 worth of grant-funded position back into the general fund, again, because of proposals from the federal government to cut funding from the federal government to the district through the state. We want to make sure those positions are funded. We need to take them out of grants, which could disappear very quickly, and are proposed to be reduced. And on the right-hand side of the reductions that we are making, we've increased class size and reduced elective offerings at the secondary level 7 through 12, about a 1.4 reduction total. And so any of the new funding for enrollment projections for growth enrollment has been removed. Class size adjustments at first grade, we're just going from 19.4 now to 21.12, and that's from the preliminary budget to this proposal. But we'll show you how those compare to actual numbers this year. It's very comparable. And in grade 2, class size from the preliminary budget to this proposal from 20 to 21.78. And again, class size and electives about another $150,000. And this was actual FTEs reduced at the high school, reductions in each department, which will change scheduling, course selection as well, and larger class sizes in some electives. Although we do this with a heavy heart, we also feel like we're still able to offer quite a bit for students in this proposal, and that would change if we are not out over the cap. That class size issue that I mentioned to you, in grade 1 next year, we're proposing being at 11 sections, which we are this year as well. Their class size will go from 20.5 as a group of first grades to 21.1. Grade 2, which is currently at 22.7, will actually be smaller next year at 21.8. But that same group of kids who are currently in first grade this year, 20.5, will go up slightly to 21.8 going into next year. So a minor increase in the class size, but again, something we feel we can accommodate. We always would like them as small as possible, but in this current situation, that seemed the most appropriate reduction. And we'll go to 12 sections at each grade at French Road. We're currently at 12, 12, and 13. We'll be at 12, 12, 12 next year. And actually at 5th grade, that results in a 0.4 child reduction at the 5th grade level. And we're pretty close. We're up slightly at 4th grade, just 0.8, and up about 2 students at the 3rd grade level going into next year. But again, relatively comfortable with those numbers. Wish they were a little bit smaller, but we can manage that going into next year given the circumstance. The Capital Reserve Fund withdrawal, we're proposing to the community being able to withdraw $3 million to continue our work. Specifically, the authorization is to withdraw $3 million from the district's existing 2015 Capital Reserve Fund to pay additional costs associated with the capital improvement project that was approved by voters May 16, 2017, but this is additional costs that we're taking out of reserves. Still sticking to the promise of borrowing what we said we would borrow, that voters approved at that time, but taking more out of reserves to cover any other increased costs in the project. This money can't go towards anything else. So it can't go to bridge any other gap. This is specifically put aside by taxpayers over time with revenue that comes in, capital aid from the state that goes into that reserve to pay for capital expenses. It can't go to pay for anything else along the way. The Technology Reserve Fund currently has a balance of $1.5 million. We need to withdraw $500,000 so that we don't have to take this expense out of the general fund, which can you imagine if we had to take that $500,000 and put even more pressure on spending going into next year? And this is for the purchase of servers, infrastructure, tablets, our staff laptop replacements, the way people do business, our student device replacements as well, and AV hardware across the district. Again, that way this expense, which is an expense that is required for us to be able to operate, doesn't have to come out of the general fund. It can come out of this reserve, which has been, again, put aside over time. Just want to repeat again this issue around the property tax cap and what this means. The total increase on the screen is 4.89%. The cap would stop us right there at support just for rolling over the budget with current programming, but not including debt service and not including the important proposals around safety, security, wellness, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The additional 2.89% allows us to do that, protects our long-term financial health. It is over the cap. We feel that that's important to do at this time. If we did not do that, we would, again, delay our problem and have to look at $1.3 million in reductions, which would include equipment, furniture, deferring that debt service, deferring planning for full-day kindergarten. We'd have to look at reductions in departments and in staffing and non-mandated programs, just delaying the problem to a future year and only growing the problem, frankly, over time. The summary of all of this, at the bottom, a new cost of $266 for a home valued at $220,000, and of course, also the loss of the rebate check. We do understand that. Not the loss of STAR, the loss of that additional rebate. And it reflects, this budget then reflects what we value, we believe. It honors the impact of that 2017 vote, responds to the mandated increases in spending for student programming that they need. It honors our blueprint commitments, specifically relative to diversity, equity, inclusion, safety, security. It's a total spending increase of 4.5%, only 1.6% of that in capital, 2.9% in operations, which would have been able to be accomplished under the cap, but we have to add for that long-term financial health and new programming. Budget hearing on the 14th, and of course, a vote on the 21st, and Kiwanis spaghetti dinner. Very important on that day as well. Any questions for me?
Does anyone have any further questions for Dr. McGowan? Because what we're gonna do is I'm gonna ask for a motion to adopt in a moment, and then we'll have discussion specific to the budget and our thoughts and anything we want to share on that. But I want to make sure while he's up there, if there's any further questions that we have.
I won't run away too far.
All right, then. May we have a motion, please, to approve the 2019-20 Brighton Central School District budget as proposed to the Board of Education in the executive budget proposal at the March 26, 2019 meeting and updated by Dr. McGowan's proposal this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Andrea and seconded by Marv. Any further comments, discussion, thoughts that anybody would like to share? Nope. I guess.
Just that we're deeply disappointed by what happens in Albany, that schools
Correct.
are not fairly funded across the board, and that this hits our district particularly hard.
We are, as we've discussed, and I don't want to take any more time, I will remind folks watching, all the budget material is posted online. All the archive of all of our meetings is on the YouTube archive channel, and you can take a look at the numerous discussions that we've had and talked about funding from the state and all the issues that we face. I guess what I would start off with on behalf of the board is thanking Kevin and Lou and Debbie, all of our people really, because this has been one of the most difficult budget periods we've ever gone through. So what we've come up with, I have to say on one hand, absolutely represents what we value in this community, what we value for the school district, but it is very disappointing for us as a Board of Education to be proposing a budget that while we believe it's the right thing, it exceeds the property tax cap, and it's at a level higher than we believe Brighton property taxpayers should really be paying. And it is entirely the fault of our state government in Albany. I'm sorry, but that is the absolute fact. If the governor and our elected officials in the Assembly and Senate were to finally figure out a way to properly and adequately fund public education in this state and apply the foundation aid formula in any way, shape, or form that was fair, that we've laid out, that we've showed them on numerous occasions over a number of years in Albany, we would not be in this position. We planned very prudently over the years. We planned this debt service. We planned the K-12 facilities upgrade because we absolutely needed to do that, both for the reasons well-known, full-day K and the rebuild of Council Rock, which we remind folks is substantially less expensive than the first alternative that we discussed, which was to be rebuild Brookside School. But all of our buildings need work. They're great buildings. We're very fortunate, but we have to plan for the future, and that work had to be done. The voters approved it, and we are in that boat. So we move forward, I think, with the best possible outcome given all the circumstances that we all operate under, and we will continue to message to the community, and we ask the community to talk with us and have conversation and understand why we are where we are. And separately, we've already begun that process of working with those in Albany again, not only on one-time aid, which may happen. We don't have huge hope. And if there is one-time aid, temporary aid for the moment, it won't be a huge amount of money. But we really need to stay to the work of getting this thing fixed for Brighton for the long haul, and we'll continue to work on that. That unfortunately can't happen until at least the next budget season, which would be next January through the end of March. So that part we will dedicate ourselves to and stay to that. But the task at hand right now, this budget and where we are, some reductions have to be made. We just can't fit it all in. I think the group has done a wonderful job of trying to keep preservation of program first and foremost, and we are on board with that, so.
I
Christina,
just
do you have
wanted to
some-
thank again,
Yep.
like our administrators for all the advocacy, but also all our parents.
Yes, absolutely.
And students were writing letters at
Yep.
those concerts, and so I just wanted to thank all of them.
We do appreciate that, and we will likely need that additional help as we move forward
We will
into
definitely need it.
next year's budget and trying to get this foundation aid formula at least repaired, if you will, for a fairness aspect. And we continue to advocate to try to get that floor to at least 60%. And that is a minimal ask, and we're not asking for the world on this. So anyway, so that is what it is. We'll continue to message to the community. We will continue to send out material. The board plans to message tomorrow to the community through the email system with our details and thoughts and hopes and feelings on the budget. And we'll continue to do that over the next month, actually about 5 weeks prior to the budget vote. So completing our conversation, I guess, then we will say all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much.
I want to take a moment too to thank our administrators here and Lou in particular for leading this, your work, Fight for Brighton. Yes, for many students and parents at concerts everywhere who were advocating, writing letters, doing what they could. But your support throughout this as a board and your guidance as well. This was definitely the most difficult place to get to at this point. And it does not feel to us like a success when we were proposing being over the cap. It feels successful in protecting program to the best of our ability and finding the best ways to be efficient in doing that, but it doesn't feel good to be recommending an increase that we're paying to, myself, personally, and many of us that participate in this as well as parents, and I know you feel that way, and it's a struggle. There is $150 million in the state budget for member item money, legislators, and $50 million of that is the governor's. It would take $60 million and change to bring every district that's under that CWR of 1 to 60%. $60 million. Instead, the $150 million will be spread out among a wide variety of political projects and pets and things that seem like fun and signs and things that people can sign their name to and take credit for in campaign commercials, when $60 million and change would more than make up our gap and would not mean we'd have to go over the cap for a long, long time, if ever, if we could get to that point. So it's just something to think about. We've advocated, we've asked the question already, what do we need to do for next year? What data do you need? How can we impress upon you the need to do this? There is no explaining that gap. So when people look at it and say, I don't understand, how could you be that far off? The reality is there is a political solution and there's a practical solution. The practical solution says we should get a certain dollar amount, but that doesn't fit the political narrative and where people would like to devote money when they're voting on it largely behind the scenes at the end of the day, and that's a problem for us. So thank you very much for the support. We will continue to advocate. That is the biggest challenge in front of us, though, is the state fulfilling their obligation and us not harming kids in the meantime because they haven't been able to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Then one other item that we need to do formally this evening with regard to the property tax report card and the budget itself. May I have a motion, please, for approval of the 2019-2020 property tax report card as outlined in the memo to the board from Kevin as prepared by Lou dated April 9th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Karen. And again, this is a more formal document that covers the property tax report card, which is required to the state, and also clarifies all the proposed resolutions, as Dr. McGowan has explained in the budget proposal. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And again, to the community, all of the documentation that we're discussing tonight will be posted online, and you can find all the detail on our website. We will get that all updated and make sure that that is available by the close of business tomorrow. So, right, Kim, we could do that. Yep. I'm not asking for, okay, thank you. Our report section then this evening, we have our financial report prepared for us by Lou, again through Kevin, along with the treasurer's report for the period ending February 28th, prepared by Lou, and our director of finance, Dahlia Watts. May we have a motion, please, to receive those reports?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Karen, seconded by Christina. Does anyone have any questions or comment with regard to those reports this evening? Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. On the positive side, our student report this evening. Tula, welcome.
Hello, happy to be here. So a couple things have been happening recently. It's, I would say, pretty busy time of year. Everyone's kind of like really deep in the year. It's the end of the third quarter at the high school. We just had a student senate meeting where the board came in, and I thought that went really well. We were talking about maybe bringing that back next year, like 2 times instead of 1. I think everyone learned a lot about what we do here, and just a little bit more about like what it means to be on the board. And I think people weren't quite understanding like that it was different from the superintendent and stuff. So I'm glad that we got that sorted out. Monday, so yesterday, we had the superintendent's conference. Some students did come in during the day. I came in for like pretty much the whole day, along with a couple other people. One of them was for a like seminar type thing in the morning, where people from this class that was happening first semester called Rhetoric of Race, and we did restorative circles, which is basically like this format that is a really safe space to allow people to talk about hard things. So we did that for the teachers and just different faculty at the school, just to show them a little bit more about it. And we had some really beautiful conversations, I think. And I think a lot of people were really moved. So that was really positive. Dr. Hall was like taking notes on it and stuff too. So that was awesome. And I'm hoping that we can bring that back next year. What else? Oh, we had the CCLT meeting after that, which was basically, it used to be a really long name, but we abbreviated it to a Culture Climate Leadership Team, which is basically just a bunch of different leadership positions throughout clubs at the school, and everyone comes together and kind of talks about different issues with diversity and how we can improve that, but also the culture and climate, like in the name of our school, as far as like drugs issues and vaping, juuling, all that stuff, and sort of figure out ways to sort out like DASA, everything kind of falls under that umbrella, and we were talking a lot in that meeting. 2 trips are coming up. The French exchange, now we're going there, and I think that's happening over April break, and maybe a little bit longer than that. I don't know, I'm not going on that one, so I think people are leaving soon for that one. I am going on the Europe trip, which is leaving tomorrow, so that's really exciting. AP Euro class is going to Prague, Vienna, and Budapest, and we're just going to see a bunch of things there, so that should be a lot of fun. And lastly, we are holding new exec elections at the high school, so we are waiting to hear back for like different positions and who wants to do what and the people that are running, and it seems like we have a good amount of people running this year, so I'm really happy about that, and you guys will have a new rep soon, which is bittersweet. Yeah, that's pretty much it at the high school. A lot of fun and busyness.
Well, safe travels.
Yeah, safe
Have a
travels.
wonderful-
Thank you.
That's
I'm very
fantastic,
excited.
Tula, thank you. And you did mention, we appreciate the opportunity to meet. It is, you're right, usually an annual tradition to meet the Board of Education with Student Senate.
Yeah.
It's always a great conversation, discussion. It was one of our better ones, I think, we all agreed this year in terms of
that's awesome.
topically and some of the things we were able to discuss. And the idea being, maybe in the future, we'll do one in the fall, and then one again, near budget time type thing.
Yeah, I
We can
think
talk
that'd be
about
really
that.
nice,
So-
because then we could talk about like what the board is in the beginning, and
Right.
then come back and maybe talk about more like issue type things
Sure.
in the second meeting, so I
Yep.
think that'd be a really great thing.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the update.
Yeah.
Our Board of Education, the Monroe County School Board's standing committee reports. First up, Labor Relations.
Yeah, next meeting is April 24th, 2 weeks from tomorrow. Pathways to Teaching from the West Arundicoit group, Jim Thomas and Karen Fintner.
That's correct, yes.
It's
Thanks.
about growing your own teaching, students that are interested in teaching, getting them interested in the profession.
I wonder where you're going if you start
Yes.
growing. You're
We're
growing your
nervous
own
over
thing,
here,
but
too.
I understand what you're doing.
Growing your own.
Teaching some candidates supply.
I was Jim Thomas's French student, his first year teaching.
Huh?
Well, there you go.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much on that, appreciate it. Our information exchange,
You want to do it?
It's tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow?
Do you know?
I do. I have
Yes.
it. You want me to do it?
Yes, that would be
Okay,
great.
Dina Swanson, who is a professor at University of Rochester, will be talking about investigating strategies for promotion of positive identity and resilience. So
Great.
noon tomorrow, we're looking forward to that. She was scheduled for February and couldn't get here because of weather/flight condition, but hopefully tomorrow shouldn't be a problem.
She was out and couldn't
In
get back
Albany, I
that
think,
day,
yep.
yeah.
Yep. So we're looking forward to
She's
that.
wonderful in that work that she does. I'm looking forward to that presentation tomorrow also. And then, I don't remember, and I think we last reported on the 12th, so the day after would have been the 13th. Last information
Right.
exchange was fascinating because that was the group of students and administrators from Churchville
Churchville
Chi-Li
Chi-Li.
on restorative practices and building leadership circles, and that was a fascinating conversation.
It was, and it
discussion
was
with that
very
group.
nice because they had 3 students.
The 3
who
students
presented,
were
and
the
they were
bulk of the
terrific, yeah.
presentation, yeah, so, great. All
They're
right,
doing
thank
some
you.
really good things.
It was a really interesting program. Legislative Committee, Karen and I were there.
We met last Wednesday on the 3rd. Had a lot to discuss regarding the budget that was passed. We spent a lot of time tonight talking about foundation aid, and we know that that affects all of our districts. But there are a couple other relevant things in this budget for us. The first one is one I'm quite happy about because we worked on this as a legislative committee, is permanently disconnecting the state tests from annual professional performance reviews. And I think that that's really very important for our teachers and for us, just for the profession as a whole. So I was pleased to see that that was made permanent. The property tax cap was made permanent. As we know, that will continue to affect us for a long time. And moving forward, what we need to do is work with the state to talk about what the necessary exclusions are when it comes to non-funded mandates. And then the other piece that we've talked about here that I think is important is the salary cap for the district superintendent that situation was finally improved.
It's going to improve in
That's
stages
gonna be a
over
great
time,
thing.
but finally some movement on
Right,
that.
right.
Well
That's
deserved by
very
those
needed.
folks.
And then the final piece that caught my eye was that school boards are now authorized to fund a teacher's retirement system reserve fund. And I think that that's important for financial health of districts going forward. Something I'd like to see us do in the future.
Be
Very
awesome if
important.
they would give us money to put in the reserve.
It would.
So I'm glad they gave us a chance to set
It
up a savings
would, but
account.
having a reserve set aside for those years when we have unanticipated spikes will offset pressure on our budget in other ways.
Yep.
We
No,
need to pay
that's-
into that system. That is what it is, and we appreciate the work that teachers have done for us over their time here. But the reserve fund will greatly ease some of that pressure.
And it's the point of us being able to use the tech reserve right now instead of having to use.
Right, exactly.
So any of those
Right.
reserves are helpful, and this was a long time coming. There is an ERS reserve that has been set up. We're more than happy, we don't fund our own retirement, we pay the bill that the state provides.
Mhm.
And, it's a mandated expense for us, but to be able to ease that, so at years when the contribution is higher or lower, we can manage that, would be great. Again, if foundation aid was where it was supposed to be, it would be easier to manage some of those long-term prospects, but I'm so glad that it was passed.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
you raise a good point. It's something that should have been known long ago, speaking of, unreasonable. But the other point that, and one of you had asked me about it, and it requires, so establishing any reserve fund requires voter approval, but in order to put it on the ballot, we would have to fund it with some amount, and this is just not the year, obviously,
No.
that we talked
Well,
about
and it's.
to be able to do that.
I
so.
think that this came out after we had
Yeah,
approved
that's
our
true, too.
proposals anyway, but in the next year or two, I would love to see us
It's
be able to
something
do
we'll
this.
look at. Yep, absolutely. And the other thing that we did, Karen makes a good point, one of the things that we do in the spring with legislative committee is sort of refine the talking points and the advocacy points based on what the budget finally looks like and the legislation in it. And one of the things that we always are on the lookout for is, even though the budget is done, there's quite a few things that can happen in Albany and do happen in Albany legislatively now through the end of the session. And you have to not be asleep at the switch and pay attention to those things, because sometimes some things can happen that are not in everybody's best interest as far as we're concerned as school districts. So we'll continue to do that. And the other thing that we're doing is setting up local appointments with all of our legislators in their local offices. And we got the first list of appointments on that today, so we will meet with Jamie and Joe locally and any other appointments that we maybe can help out with, so thank you very much, Karen. And we do have, I believe, the Information Exchange and Labor Relations April meetings are the final meetings of the
Yes.
year. Legislative will meet into May, and then also a reminder that the Monroe County School Board's annual meeting is at the end of May, and we've all got a note on that, so if you plan to attend that, let the office know, or let Kim know, and she'll let them know, so. BOCES report, Marv, do you have anything for us this
Yeah,
evening?
Karen mentioned the district superintendent cap has been lifted over a period of time, but that was good news. And on April 24th, 25th will be Skills USA at Syracuse Fairgrounds for the EMCC students, and there'll be some Brighton students that will participate in that.
Great. Thank you very much. And then our other board member reports, so this is an update on activity that we've been engaged in individually since our last report of March the 12th. Anything that you'd like to share out on that? Christina, we'll start at your end.
The library and media program evaluation completed last week, and we just got the final report, so we will go through that, and somebody will present it to the board
Great.
at some point. It was a great to really think about how the library is used and how it can be used.
Great.
In the future. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that. We'll have those report outs over the next couple of months for all those committees. So.
Right, so world language is the same. We just finished up all the loose ends, and we'll be having a presentation in May on that. Diversity, equity, we met as a large group. I sit on the group for the students with special needs, and we just went through, we sort of broke out, we came back together, we talked through our next steps, each group. So, and several of the board members here were at the Be the Healing, which was also done in restorative circles.
On the 18th that night.
On the
yeah.
18th. Right.
Great. Thank you very much. Larry?
Construction season is just about in full swing, so we're meeting almost every week.
Our budget season and construction season,
yeah.
12 months a year. Pretty
Yeah,
much.
well, July and August will be pretty intense.
That's
We've
big
got
time,
things
yeah.
going on in all the schools, a lot of work. Great recognition for our buildings and facilities crew who are out there meeting with the public, talking to the public. A lot of work going on in Council Rock, a lot of digging, a lot of earth moving, getting the foundation ready. We want to make as much progress as possible, but work going on the roof and French Road are preparing for that. I mean, I don't know, there's 15 things going on in all four
The
schools.
auditorium at the high school
Auditorium at the
very
high
shortly.
school, right, and
Yeah.
do some things to make that a better place as well. So, very exciting, but a ton of work, and that means a lot of change orders, so credit to Lou and those teams for what they've got to do there. We don't have audit until May, and I would just say that both Allison and Principal Tap and Throw a really great ice cream social, because there's nothing more therapeutic than handing out ice cream to those kids.
Ice cream
So, and
socials
families.
are some of the best.
Some of the
French
best,
Road and
right.
Council Rock, and yeah, we all love helping out at those and seeing everybody and the families.
Right.
So thank you.
That's it.
Appreciate it. And thank you for all your efforts, as always, with the construction committee, and that's difficult work and detailed minutia that needs to be taken care of, so thank you. Karen?
Two of my committees have been in a lull, so later this week, I'll be meeting with the Family Engagement Subcommittee of the Diversity and Equity Committee, wrapping up our work to present to the larger group. Curriculum Council meets on April 25th. Again, we'll be wrapping up our work for the year. I sit on the subcommittee for grading of non-academic behaviors, which is fascinating work. I met with the District Environmental Committee last week. That's been a real bright spot for me this year. There's a lot of student involvement in that committee, and there's a lot of outside-of-the-box thinking. And so students and parents and professionals and staff and faculty are working together to think about what a climate action plan would look like for the district and how that translates first into policy and then into action. And I'm just really pleased to be a part of that group and for Lou's leadership on the group and really truly for student leadership. watching them in action means we're doing the right things.
Great. Well, thank you very much for bringing that to us. Marv, anything new?
Well, library review, as Christine said, met last week and finished up, and we have the draft of the final report. Curriculum Council will meet later this month, and Teacher Center Policy Board, I believe, in June.
Okay, thank you. Julene?
I was at a Brighton Believes meeting last Thursday, and the majority of our conversation was about Clean Sweep, which is Saturday, May 12th, from 9 until 12. So we'd like all the participation. Anybody who's available, please, through your schools, through your buildings, or through the town hall, you can sign up to participate, either as families or kids.
It's individuals,
Yep,
right? Yeah.
with their schools.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. A couple quick things for me. A week from Monday, I was invited to present and discuss with Law and Government in large group session, which was fascinating. I've talked to the group and I've passed on to the board usually. Law and Government students, as part of their assignment at the beginning of their semesters normally, they write to elected officials, and I always am very pleased and surprised to get quite a number of letters from our students on topics all over the place. And so they invited me to come, and we had a great discussion about their letters and the questions that they asked, but then also other things that were on their minds in the large group session. And I think the more time we spend with students, no offense to all of our adults, but the more time spent with students and discussing things with students is a positive, right? It's a way better thing. So I did enjoy that. And the other thing I'll give you just a very quick update on, because there's a lot more to come on this over a long period of time. Safety Committee, District-wide Safety Committee met today, and that is a very large committee that represents all constituents, as you can imagine, decision makers around the table. And we have, over the last couple of meetings, really begun the process, I will tell you, of evaluating all that we do with regard to safety and security. And that's an ever-changing world around us. The recommendations from the federal and state governments and law enforcement on how best to apply that to schools and buildings, public education buildings. So we're beginning and have been working the last couple of meetings, and it will evolve shortly into some more lengthy conversations and work groups over, which is really what a constant issue that it is, constantly evaluating what we do, how we do it, looking at what the research says, what the data says, and the best ways to go forward with regard to safety and security. So a lot more to come on that as we work through that. So next up, our Brighton Teachers Association report. We're happy to have Judy Wegman here this evening with us again. Judy, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very happy to be here filling in for Beth Jacqueline. Continue to send her our best wishes.
And our continuing best regards to her, that's correct.
Thank you, I'll pass that along. Lots of great things happening with our Brighton Teachers Association members and our students, both in school and outside of school in our community. Starting with the music department at French Road. Students have been creating short compositions using iPads. It's a great example of the effective use of the technology that our community is helping to support, and they're performing those compositions in small groups. Some 4th and 5th graders are excited to be learning how to play the ukulele. Kind of fun. 4th and 5th grade chorus are preparing for their spring concerts. As well as some 5th grade students in a music class exploring the genre of rap music, especially with the Hamilton craze that's around Rochester right now. And as they unpack that artistic style, they've been inspired to create some of their own rap music with classmates. And another excellent example of a project-based learning experience for students that focuses on the new music standards. Continuing at French Road, Rick LaPaglia, one of our French Road physical education teachers, is presented at the Central Western Zone Physical Education Conference the end of March. Ellen Harp, she's a technology teacher at French Road. She was elected to the Society for Professions in Technology, so congratulations to her. March, who knew, was National Nutrition Month. So at Council Rock, students worked very hard, especially through the physical education programming there, to review the importance of healthy decision-making and eating using a My Plate diagram, and they used their knowledge of different food groups and then integrated it actually into physical education skills in their program. Also at Council Rock, the kids continued to explore Lifetime Fitness. They actually, the kids had an opportunity to participate in a Zumba Kids lesson that was actually brought into the PE classes by a community member, Sue Gasparino. So special thanks to her for coming in to give our kids a great experience. In about the middle of March, Eric Morris and Jen Wheeler from the high school accompanied 32 students from their comparative religions and English classes, in English as a new language classes, as well as our Muslim Student Association, International Clubs to Nazareth College, and its annual Global Citizenship Conference. So this year's conference was focused on world religions and what it means to be not just tolerant, but accepting and respecting of others who come from many different perspectives in our world. So it was a wonderful event to see our students represent our school district on a college campus and to actively participate with over 700 students from all over Monroe County. Seventh grade German students worked with Ms. Lambert, TCMS librarian, and Frau Walter to plan virtual parties. Again, a collaborative, cooperative work experience. Students worked in groups, planned and designed their own parties, and then attended their parties with their classmates. Attended was in quotes. I don't quite know how they attended a virtual party, but they had a great time nonetheless. March 16th, the Best Buddies of Western New York hosted a ball at the Port of Rochester. There were many Best Buddy Club members that attended. It was great to see our buddies having such a fun time outside of their academic setting. And then coming up very soon, on May 4th, students will be participating in the Best Buddies Friendship Walk. Sean Mahan will be the Grand Marshal for the walk, and we're very excited to have him representing. Anyone who's interested in contributing to that is a fundraiser effort, please contact either Sarah Potter or Lori Wider from TCMS, who facilitate the Best Buddies programming. Some sixth graders in Maria Katsetta's class have been collaborating across buildings to Ashley Rhodes and Robin Ackerman's second grade class at Council Rock School, as well as Katie Covert and Katie Fallon's fourth grade classes at Frenchwood Elementary School. Students wrote letters to the town of Brighton proposing what the new land at Buckland Park can be potentially used for, and the students will be displaying this collaborative work at the Brighton Memorial Library, so you can stop over there and see their efforts. The Brighton Teachers Association as a group supported educators and students on the island of Saipan, which is a commonwealth of the United States. We supported them by collecting school supplies for students. You may know that in the fall, Saipan experienced a devastating hurricane, and they're just now setting up temporary schools to get them back up and running. And the Brighton Teachers Association sent 233 pounds of school supplies to help in that effort. You don't even want to know what postage cost on that. But it was well worth it. We're happy to help them. Brighton Teachers Association also is proud to sponsor Brighton Youth Sports again this year. So you'll see our banner out on the sports fields, as well as a sponsor for Brighton Clean Sweep. Very happy to be a part of that. BTA has been a participating member in the Adopt a Highway program for the last several years, right here along Monroe Avenue, and we enjoy connecting our spring cleanup to the Brighton Clean Sweeps efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judy, and thank you for sharing all of our teacher activities, or at least some. We'll look into the room. Leslie, tonight for the PTSA, welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, at the high school, the PTSA's meeting with the principals in conjunction with SPED, the special ed arm of the PTSA this month. The topic was navigating college choices for atypical students. It was well attended and very helpful information. The presentation was taped, and you can find it on Brighton's YouTube channel. There's a lot of energy right now around continuing the Blue Ribbon theme through Springfest. BHS PTSA are participating on the Springfest committee to help plan special events for the 2019 celebration. PTSA is continuing with planning for Senior Bash, the senior bus trip, and the Quinless reading lunch coming up in the last part of the school year. Senior Bash, which is our fun, safe celebration for seniors following senior banquet, takes a lot of volunteer power and money to make it a memorable event for the seniors. Any donations are most welcome and needed at this point. They can be made by going to the BCSD website, head to the Brighton High School page, and look for the Bash link for donations. At the middle school, The third and final activity nights were held for grade 6 and grade 7. The third 8th grade one is coming up on May 3rd. It will be a crossover night held for 8th graders at the high school, so they get a feel for enjoying the building. The pool will be available to 8th graders, as well as the usual activity night offerings of a DJ, pizza and snacks, games, snow cones, and open gym. The next TCMS PTSA meeting with the principal will be on April 24th at 7 p.m. The topic will be middle school addictions, vaping, and screen time. 3 doctors will be coming to present on the topics. And the TCMS Staff Appreciation Luncheon will be held on May 7th. It will be a Harry Potter theme. At French Road, the French Road PTSA held their ice cream socials for grade 3 and 4. Everyone thought the vendor Brewster's was great. They were well attended. 5th grade will now have their ice cream social as part of their new graduation day ceremonies. The FRES PTSA participated in helping to rework the 5th grade graduation day festivities. Each classroom will now have their own ceremony, and then all 5th graders and families will go back of FRES for a celebration with food, trucks, and ice cream. At Council Rock, the Council Rock PTSA held their ice cream socials for kindergarten and 1st grade last week, and will host the 2nd grade ice cream social this Thursday, April 11th. They are still looking for volunteers if anyone would like to step up. Fun Food Friday at Council Rock was held on March 15th. Dates were tasted by the children at lunchtime. The next Fun Food Friday will be tasting different varieties of apples. PTSA volunteers helped with kindergarten and new student registration. Very long lines, but went smoothly. And planning is underway for the bike walk to school day in March.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that from the PTSA. And one addition, just a reminder to folks in the budget realm, this Friday at noon, PTSA is holding a budget presentation forum, right?
Yep.
And here in this room?
Right here in this room.
So central office, board meeting room, this Friday, April 12th at noon to 1 o'clock ish. We'll be there, a couple of us will be there along with Dr. McGowan. And any members of the public are welcome to attend that. And that's sponsored by the PTSA, and we'll be there to talk about budget and discuss that with anyone who wishes to come.
The aid doesn't get better, but the jokes do.
I
Happy
can't-
to talk
I
more
can't-
about it,
I can't
please.
speak to that, but anyway, superintendent's report, Dr. McGowan.
I'm really struck listening to that. First, the 5th grade moving up program, I think, was a really interesting shift. That parents helped shape that. Mr. Thomas and I would be happy to give our rah-rah speech. We'll be in the cafeteria the entire time if anybody would like to join.
I'm sorry.
Yes, you did laugh out loud.
Well, you said the jokes got better, so that's okay.
But if you think about everything that the BTA reports, and thank you, G, for that, and Leslie, the PTSA, and Tula's report from a student perspective, and a lot of what all of you had to say, think about that amazing work that goes into everything that happens here, that obnoxiously long and relatively boring but important presentation is supporting. That's the work. That's what we're talking about. And it's not that all these great things then disappear, that it's a threat that it changes if that doesn't, but it does change who we are, and that's what people here are supporting. All of that great work and all of those great experiences. When we talk about Blue Ribbon, when we talk about the niche rankings that came out, our district, the top in upstate, 8th in the state, 46th of 10,000 in the country. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens from a supportive community and all the programs that are detailed and are supported, the non-mandated things, right? The mandates, the 1st grade class, the English class at the high school, the 7th grade math class, those are really well done and awfully important. But the things that also distinguish us are the other pieces, the ways that we've thought about things differently for decades in this district as a community. And that's what's supported in that spending plan. So I don't have anything more to add than I already talked too much, but I appreciate all of those reports really following and wanted to just kind of connect those two things because they are intimately related. So thank you.
It's, as we say, it's the work. So that is it. So thank you very much for that. A couple of other items of business remain this evening on the agenda. Folks, could we have a motion, please, for approval of the election inspectors, the chief election officers, and the chairs for the annual district vote?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Marv, seconded by Julene. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We have 3 separate bids this evening. We'll take them one at a time. A motion, please, to approve the cooperative bid for art supplies.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Christina and seconded by Larry. Again, all three of these I'll explain the same way. They are cooperative bids through the BOCES 2 purchasing service, and we subscribe to that, and we get the lowest possible competitive bids for all these different materials that we're going to talk about. So this one is the one for art supplies that we have. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion then to approve the cooperative bid covering magazines, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Karen and seconded by Julene. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then finally, the approval for the cooperative bid for fine paper, which is the standard copy paper.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Andrea and seconded by Larry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And one of those fun elements tonight, we do have approval for a textbook requirement. May we have a motion, please, to approve the textbook recommendation covering the AP Calculus textbook, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Marv, as traditional with math texts,
Pretty good.
and seconded by
Pretty good.
Karen.
It's a pretty good summary.
You can't second it also, I'm sorry. But I will remind folks that when a textbook recommendation comes forward to us, and I have to admit, it's interesting that we don't approve many textbooks anymore, that the way that we use materials is entirely different than it used to be. But there are some subjects and some situations that, in one case here, we're replacing a 2010 text and a 2002 text, so it's time for the calc text, I would say. And I'm sure everyone picked up the book this week and read through it in detail, and
Well, I did appreciate the way the summary was
The
presented.
summary
It
the
was
was good.
really
the
easy
summary
to
is fantastic.
understand.
That's the point I wanted to make. Folks would not always know this, but when a textbook recommendation comes about, there is a selection committee put together of the folks from the department. Sometimes others are involved, but they spend a lot of time in detail researching all materials available, finding what works, what's cost-effective, and then putting together essentially a 4-page summary for us that we can clearly read through and take a look at and follow them to their conclusion. So we do appreciate, in this case, Andrea, Matt, and Anne Marie, but any of our folks that work on these textbook selection committees, we do appreciate that.
And it's just interesting to notice things evolve. There's a section in here about peripheral support, where our students have access to apps and other technological
The
supports
online.
that go along with buying a textbook
Right.
today.
Yeah, we don't buy a book alone anymore at
Right.
all. a
So
book.
they can access an app called Calc Chat. They can go chat about calculus. I mean, that's probably not what it's about, but still, Calc Chat.
Connected to
I was
Mars.
struck by that.
Marv picks it up.
Calc Chat. Right.
No, you're right, though.
Didn't have those things when I learned calculus, I'll tell you that.
All right, anybody else, bad jokes or not? Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then finally, a motion, please, to approve our consent agenda this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Julene, seconded by Marv. All in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I would point out there's a fundraiser. I do know somebody that might be involved in this. Panera tomorrow night, Trapezoid is included in there as well.
I think actually we approved that
Last time.
at the last meeting, so we ended up taking it off of this agenda.
Oh.
But the fundraiser
But there is a
exists.
fundraiser tomorrow night, a
Yeah.
Trapezoid fundraiser at Panera. You have to tell
Yes.
them, though, that you're there for the
Yes.
Trapezoid
Right,
fundraiser.
you have to let them know that when you come in, and that was approved, and we ended up looking at it, and it was approved at our last meeting, but yes, thank you very much. Board members, any other items of business this evening? Does anybody have anything?
I'd just like to say kudos to everybody who was involved with the performance this past weekend at the high school. It was spectacular.
And different.
It was different. It was just so well done that I kept sitting there saying to myself, wait a minute, these are high school students. They just really did a spectacular job, everybody who was involved, and it was very different. It was in the round, we were all seated on the stage. It was a small audience, but it was really a very powerful and moving show and just a fabulous job. So kudos to everybody.
Fantastic. And I guess what an appropriate, wonderful way to usher out the old auditorium.
One last concert,
Oh, there's one last concert?
Wednesday. Chamber orchestra and chorus mixed
You better
chorus.
hurry up, because I think the construction guys
They're
are
itching
staging
to
in the
get
hallway.
They're attending the concert.
As soon as the
They're
concert's
swinging hammers
over.
right afterwards.
One last concert.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. McGowan, anything further this evening?
Nothing else.
All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Larry and seconded by Andrea. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.